Well, hello, my friends. So good to be together again today. And my mind is still on the resurrection. And, Easter was last Sunday. I know this will be kind of a dated, uh, you know, FaceTime and Instagram. It'll be kind of dated, but you might as well know last Sunday was Easter or Resurrection Sunday, as we call it around our church. And so I'm still in that mode, that resurrection mode, still learning and getting the revelation of it. And I want to share more about that with you. And I see Nathan Stuchenko's the first one on here today. So glad you're here. We're so excited to have you come. And I've been talking to your friend here. You know who I mean, and what that means. And if we're gonna be able to get together, you two guys together. So I'm talking to him. Hopefully, maybe today about that. There's Valerie. Good to see you. And so we're going to talk about more about the resurrection in a practical way. Not the spiritual way, like what does it mean and how he defeated death, which he did, which gave us the ability to be resurrected. And he was resurrected, obviously. But some of the practical things that people don't think about and what it's going to mean to us as resurrected people. What does that mean? What's it going to be like? And what are we going to do with it once it happens? And so I talked today. Oh, I wanted to mention to you something funny. I thought was funny. I was all this last week or so, last couple of weeks, looking at the news, trying to get updates on Ukraine and what's going on in Europe. And I almost couldn't get it. I mean, because isn't it funny? The top headlines were the Academy Awards and the slap heard round the world. And the Academy Awards was the first story, and everybody was talking about that. And you got to, and finally, I get through all those and all what the stars are saying and what the people are saying, what the Academy Award people are saying. And then finally I get, oh yeah, there's a war going on, isn't there? It finally got down to the war. I hope that's past now. So I've been trying to get some updates on that. But anyway, hi, Kathy and Darren and Vanita, Mary. It's good to see everybody today and have us together today. And so I just thought that was funny. Like the slap heard around the world was bigger news than the war that's in the world. So finally, we're back to that, and we're praying about Ukraine, and had a discussion this morning with someone about Ukraine, and so anyway, we keep praying for the God's will to go forth, and that evil to be defeated, of course. And what that means to the church is the advancement of the kingdom. Anyway, you that just joined us, and those that just joined us, I'm still on the subject of the resurrection, which was last Sunday, was Resurrection Sunday at our church and all the churches, and what Easter, of course, to a lot of people. And going to talk a little bit, Victoria. We're going to talk a little bit about what it means to us practically, other than knowing that Jesus, died, defeated death, and rose again from the dead, and he's the first fruit of those who belong to him. The plan is everybody that belongs to him will also be resurrected, because he had to defeat this toad, right? He had to save us completely, because at the excuse me, at the fall, in the Garden of Eden, we know that death entered the world, and spiritual death, the glory of God, in my opinion, which I've told you before, was on them, was on Adam, was on Eve. And when they'd sinned, that glory left. And that's when they knew they were naked, because they were covered with glory of God. All of sin, fallen short of the glory of God. And so now we're in that restoration. Remember, we talked about the Jesus who he came as a baby, and he died and rose again from the dead, set the example of resurrection, coming back from the dead. Then he ascended. And then we also know that he's going to return. The weakest part of Christianity has been in the middle. Like, it's hard to believe, who are we now? What are we supposed to be doing now? And what are we supposed to be believing now? So we talked a little bit about that, as Jesus, our high priest, and also then the return. Okay, so we also know, though, that we as believers are also going to be part of the resurrection. And we talked about those who have already passed will, when Jesus returns for the final return, and the end of the age, and we get a new heaven and a new earth, and righteousness reigns. And he comes to restore all things. We talked about judgment. Judgment has always been a negative thing, but not for believers, you see, because The plan from the time Jesus started his ministry was to be the example of restoration. I've come to restore and be the example of restoration. So every time he healed somebody, it was, see, that's what's coming. It was a picture. That's what's coming. Health is coming, right? Every time he'd cast out a devil, it was good for the person and helped, and everybody was amazed. But it was more of the kingdom of God is here, and this is what's coming: a world without demons, a world without sickness, a world without evil. Righteousness reigns. So he was demonstrating what is coming, and then he ascended, and we're in the middle, and we're here to walk this out and help demonstrate the kingdom also. But then it says he will return, and those that have already passed, they will be come up out of the graves, and they will be transformed and resurrected. Well, they're resurrected out of the graves, and they'll be transformed to become like Jesus. They will get their bodies back, but it'll be a resurrected body, just like Jesus has right now. So he's the first. And if there's a first fruit, there's a second and a third and a fourth, and all the way to millions. And so John, in the Bible, John says we're not exactly sure what that's going to be like, and we're going to talk about that. But we know we're going to be like him. Whatever he is now, we're going to be like that, because he's the first fruit, and we're going to be second and third. And then those people that are alive and remain on the earth, so there'll be some people that will be alive when he comes back. Not everybody's going to be dead. Then they'll also be transformed just instantly in the twinkling of an eye. They'll be changed, and their body says, I know it's rough, boy. It's a rough thing. This is so huge, right? It's so powerful, so much for us to comprehend that. And I think maybe is it easier to think of maybe the graves opening, because Jesus' grave opened, his grave opened, and he was resurrected, and then, but to think of the thought that I could be, or you could be, or we could be, or our kids could be just, minding our own business, going into Quick Trip to pay for our gas, and Jesus returns. Anyway, I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's going to work exactly like that, but it does say we will be changed. We'll be transformed. We will be have a resurrected body instantly after those come up out of their grave. So I don't know what everybody else that doesn't belong to Jesus. I don't know what they did. It's got that covered, but I'm just talking about what's going to happen. So we'll be instantly, if you're alive. And he says, and we who are alive and remain will be changed forever instantly. So anyway, all right. So what's it going to be like? So we can only look to Jesus and see what he was like. And we only have little pictures of it, but it's really interesting. So today I called it Walking Through Walls. And, can you imagine that? Okay, so Jesus, he comes back after the resurrection. And one of the stories we get is so the disciples and the women too, they're all afraid of the Jews. They're afraid. So they go in secrecy to wherever they go, and they lock the doors because to keep the Jews out. All right. So the doors are locked, and the Bible specifically lets us know the doors are locked on purpose, because the doors are locked so Jesus couldn't get in through the doors, and he instantly appears among them through the locked doors. All right. And we're supposed to know that, and he talks to him, and so apparently that's one of the things, is you can walk through walls, you can walk through doors, because he did. And he did it with his resurrected body. I don't think he did it because he's Jesus. I think he did it because he's got a resurrected body, and there's no limits to that. But one of the things that's really, really interesting to me is, so he had a resurrected body. We know that. And he appears, and he comes on the shore, remember, and he's Peter sees him, and the disciples are there and all that. And all of a sudden he's on the shore, and he tells them to give him something to eat. And they give him fish to eat. So he's on the shore, and this is before, the great line where he meets with Peter, and he says, feed my sheep, feed my lambs, and all that. Do you love me? Yes, Peter, if he loves him. But before that, he eats with them. And so the resurrected Jesus is eating fish, right? So figure that out. So what's that? So I guess there's still going to be some fish places around, Red Lobster or something still going to be on the corner or whatever. But imagine, it's hard to imagine the resurrected Jesus is still eating. So he walks, or he doesn't walk, he appears to be able to appear without, with the doors locked, but then he has a meal with them. Okay, I'm not trying. And then that's not the only time. And then in Luke, he's walking on the Hi Beth, and he's walking on the road to Emmaus, and he appears, and they don't know who he is, to two guys. Most scholars believe one of them was Peter, because one of them has to tell the story. But anyway, whoever it was, they think it was Peter. But anyway, so they're walking along, and Jesus, shows up, and they don't know it's Jesus. And they're telling him the story. Are you the only one who doesn't know what happened today and what's happened with the Messiah, and all the things we've heard, and so they go into it, and Jesus just talks to him and talks to him, and then at the very end of it, as Jesus does it, they eat together. And when he does that, suddenly their eyes are opened to see who it is. And then once their eyes are open, guess what happens? Boop, he disappears right before their eyes. Gone. So here's the Jesus that appeared, and the doors are locked. He appeared. Then all of a sudden he's on the shore and eating fish. And then he walked along, and they did who he was, did not recognize him. And then it's because of their eyes, not because of him. And then their eyes are opened. They recognize it's the resurrected Jesus, and he's out of there. He disappears. Amazing. Well, it says we don't know exactly what it's going to be like, but we will be like him. All right. So sounds like we're going to be able to at least eat fish, right? At least. So hope you like fish. So anyway, as we move along, then we go to great passage, a great resurrection passage is 1 Corinthians 15. And Paul's, can we call it argument, presentation of the resurrected from the dead is there, but there's something else for us, I think, there. So Paul goes in to describe that Jesus was raised from the dead, and he appeared to people after he was raised from the dead. And I think I jotted down here, I think it was he appeared, I think, to Peter first, and then he appeared to the others, and eventually then we'll talk about who he appeared more to in a minute. But eventually then Paul says, and then he appeared to me. Now, this is different, because when you remember when he appeared to Paul, who was Saul at the time, Saul was on the road to Damascus, and a great light flashed, and he fell, and he heard the voice of Jesus saying, "Why do you persecute me?" And he said, "Who are you, Lord?" And the voice came back, "I'm Jesus who you're persecuting." And then he can't see, and he goes on, and the story goes. So, but Paul calls that an appearing. All right. But there's a struggle with that. So an appearing, but it always gave him trouble, because he said, lastly, he appeared to me. But the rest of the disciples, the ones we were talking about, that were in that room when he appeared, he appeared and they disappeared, and on the road to Emmaus disappeared, or the ones that were on the shore and saw him, and we'll talk about some others that saw him, actually saw the resurrected body, ate fish with him, let's just call it like that, who became apostles. They couldn't quite handle that. Some of them didn't handle it. It was a real struggle. It took a long time. Some of them didn't ever do it. And then others to really call Paul an apostle. Why? Because he called it, he appeared to me, but they said, yeah, but he didn't appear to you like he appeared to us. You didn't really see him. You weren't there. Oh, wait a minute. They're saying you weren't there. What? Well, okay. But think about this. This is exciting. So how, when he said, "Who are you, Lord?" and Jesus said, "I'm Jesus whom you're persecuting." He said, "I'm Jesus." How Paul, the persecutor that throws Christians in prison, how did he know who Jesus was? I'm Jesus. Oh, okay. You know why he knew it was Jesus? because he had seen him. Maybe he didn't see the resurrected Jesus. Maybe he did. We don't know. But we do know that as a persecutor, Jesus was famous. The Pharisees opposed him. That he was a high up Pharisee. Here's what I think. I think he knew who Jesus was. He opposed him, probably didn't like him, and that's why he opposed afterwards. He threw Christians in prison and persecuted them. He knew who Jesus was. He knew he'd been crucified. And when he says, I'm Jesus, whoa, he knew that was to him. He could see him in his mind. He could hear his voice again. Maybe he heard him preach, and he heard his voice again instantly. He knew who Jesus was. So it was a little different appearing, but he knew who Jesus was. He said, I'm Jesus. Whoa, whoa. You are the real thing, because I saw you die. He had to. As high up as he was, he was top Pharisee. You tell me he didn't know who Jesus was in Jerusalem? Maybe he was there at the mock trial. We don't know, but maybe. And so he was going after to persecute him. I'm thinking he knew who Jesus was. So since he knew who Jesus was in the flesh, maybe he saw him in the resurrection. And of course, he didn't believe. He wouldn't have believed. You say, where are you getting that maybe? He saw him in the resurrection. I'll tell you in a second. And then when Jesus said, I'm Jesus, pop, he put it all together. And instantly he knew, what do you want me to do? You get that? Isn't that exciting? Because it's a little stretch to say, I'm Jesus. He goes, who? Oh, I have no idea who you are. I never heard of you. That doesn't fit, does it? See, he's coming out of that culture. They knew who Jesus was. He knew he was persecuting, and he knew instantly, this is the real deal. This guy's alive. This guy, he's calling me from heaven. He did ascend to heaven. Exciting when you think of that happening to a person, right? So then we have others. By the way, as a picture of what's coming, did you know that it says when Jesus was raised from the dead and the earthquakes happened and everything, that people came out of the graves even then? And nobody can figure that out. Scholars have not been able to figure what happened to them. But I don't know. They struggle with that. I don't struggle with it so much because came out of the graves. Okay, were they resurrected? I don't think so, because it wasn't time for us people to be resurrected. Came out of the graves because Lazarus came out of the grave. And he was still Lazarus. He just came back alive again. So I think the power of the resurrection was so powerful, it didn't resurrect him, but life came back and people came out of the graves. Interesting anyway. Okay, but anyway. Okay, so he said, Paul writes, he appeared to Peter. He appeared to the disciples. And get this. Now get this. And then he said, he appeared to 500 people. 500 people. 500 people. At the same time, wherever that was, saw Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, 500 people. Now, maybe Saul was in that crowd. Maybe he did see the resurrected Lord, because he's saying, I'm an apostle. But the rest of the apostles said, well, you didn't see the resurrected. Maybe he did. Maybe he was in the crowd. But anyway, get this. So there were 500 people who saw the resurrected Jesus, right? Well, that's pretty exciting. So a lot of people saw him, and he said, maybe it was over 500, but at least 500 people saw the resurrected Jesus walking around or whatever he's doing, eating fish. And they saw him. And he said, many of them, now Paul's later writing this, see, this is in Corinthians. And he says, many of them are still alive to this day. Of the 500, many of them, or most of them, are still alive. That means there were people, hey, Daniel, that means there are people alive on the earth when Paul's doing his ministry that could tell you what it was like to see the resurrected body of Jesus walking the earth, because there were 500 of them, most of them still alive when Paul was ministering at Corinth. Exciting, right? All right, now, what's the catch of that, though? Okay, there's a catch to it that's really interesting. Okay, here's the catch. All right, so Jesus is raised from the dead. The disciples see him. He comes in. He walks through walls or through doors or whatever, and he all of a sudden appears, and then he appears and to and eats fish with them and all that stuff, and then he goes on the road to Emmaus and disappears, all that good stuff, and then it says they saw him, and 500 saw him. 500 people saw him. Okay, then explain this to me. If 500 people, I mean, this is just religion for you. If 500 people saw the resurrected Jesus before he ascended to heaven, why were there only 120 in the upper room when the Holy Spirit fell? Where were the Now, when he said 500, they usually only counted men. I mean, I doubt if they're saying there were 500 men and women. They're saying they probably just counted the men. And in the upper room, they only counted the men. So there were women there too. I imagine, the mother, Mary, the mother of Jesus, the other Marys, other people, women were there, but they didn't count them. So 120 men, but in the 500, probably 500 men. Where were the rest of them? I'm hoping if I was one of those that saw the resurrected Jesus and I listened and said, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit falls upon you. So stay in Jerusalem till that power falls. Man, I'd just be like this. I can't. And then I'd start meeting for prayer. Right. It doesn't say just the 12. It says somehow, and the women too would be on top of the 120, but 120 men were meeting, and all of a sudden 120 were in the upper room, and the Holy Spirit falls down with tongues of fire, and they all began to speak in tongues and prophesy and glorify God. That's great. Where were the rest of them? 500 saw it. Well, that's religion for you, right? That's religion for you. Great things happen. You think, oh, God, if you just do a miracle, God, if you just do something great, God, if you just do that, God, if you just, all the people would come. My church would change. If you just come down and do something spectacular, all the people in my church would just fall on their face and they'd all start serving God, and all the teenagers would cry out for mercy and throw away all their junk. And not so. Israel had, hi, Heather. And Israel had, Israel had miracles, and they walked on dry ground and all the miracles, and they're still struggling in unbelief. So I don't know. Maybe they saw 500 saw, maybe they struggled in unbelief. Maybe they're just distracted. Maybe they had too many things to do. Maybe I don't know, but it's an amazing thought to me that if 500 people saw the resurrected Jesus, and Jesus is talking about, stay in Jerusalem till you receive power. It is an amazing thought to me that only 120 made it into the upper room, because by the time the days had passed and by the time Pentecost came, all the others had fallen away or disappeared or lost interest. And that's religion for you. But it's good news for us, because Jesus said, because we think, wow, how exciting that would be to be one of those 500. Yep, sure would have been. And how exciting it would have been to see, and because the disciples saw, and then obviously they were in the upper room with others, to be those disciples and to be those 120 that made it to the upper room. And how exciting that would be to be a part of that. However, Jesus makes it clear that there's a greater blessing. He said, blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet they believe, right? Well, Paul said it appeared to him and appeared to Peter, appeared to 5. Well, not to me, not to you, but we are blessed. Because you know what? We believe. 500 people saw, but not 500 people believed. By the time the day of Pentecost came, many of them had fallen away. So it's great news, isn't it? Great news, a great day we live in, because we're on the other end. We could have been on the front end when Jesus went up. Now we're on the back end looking for him to come down. Which would you rather, if he gave you choices, would you rather be standing there and watching me go say bye bye? Or would you rather be on the other end and say, watching me come and say hello? Rather be on the bye bye end or the hello end? We are on the hello end. We live in a blessed day. That's why we watch everything going on in the world today. So I just wanted to share that with you, kind of a fun thing, walking through walls, appearing, disappearing, eating fish. What are we going to be like? What's it going to be like when we get that resurrected body? I don't know all the answers to that, but it sounds pretty exciting to me that we should stick with this, because that's the plan, that you be saved spirit, soul, and body. And that's the plan of God, right?